daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of your Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, and as always today joined by my good friend, a wonderful co-host, Zach Ingo-Finch. How you doing today, mate? You right?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm a bit less animated than I guess I was last night, but that's because I was tired and annoyed that
And reasonably so. It was at best a disappointing result, but look, we're not going to dwell on that. I've prepared an episode for us today, and in very us fashion, it is wonderfully timed, right? I've prepared a piece on multi-club ownership models and what they are and whether they're good and what the benefits are and what the costs are. And it starts off, I will spoil Zach, that it starts off as a really quite well-written, factual essay and in true characteristic style, tails off into a bit of a ramble when it gets to the bit about how it applies to Saints and the good and the bad. But that's just how I do things. So
that's fair.
So yeah, I guess we'll crack on with it. I will try and leave some space, my friend, for you to interject. But yeah, I guess let's get straight into it. And I'll try and come up for air at some point. So it feels like the most important time to have the conversation because the focus at the moment is well and truly on Sports Republic. We've seen a lot of it on the social media. We've seen outcry from Alfie House. They're not pointing the fingers at the manager. They're pointing their fingers at Sports Republic and at Johan Spors. Can we be mad with Johan Spors for not getting his decisions exactly correct on his first attempt at doing so? For me, that's a very similar answer to does the blame solely lie with Will Still? The answer is no. But that the whole argument, the whole issue boils back down to recruitment and comes back to Sports Republic and down to the reason that we do this recruitment, which is the structure, which is the multi-club, which is driven by the fact that they want to do this multi-club model. And because our sort of buy young, sell later philosophy is sort of the key philosophy of their multi-club model. So I thought I would take it right the way back to the very start and do a very nice piece that starts with what is a multi-club model and why would anyone want it?
Why does anybody want it, Greg? That's the real question.
Well, that's the thing. The answer may surprise you. Multi-club ownership is exactly what it says on the tin, right? A company or an owner owning more than one club. Some multi-club ownership groups are smaller operations with one majority shareholding in a club and a couple of minority shareholders in a separate club. Like the Crystal Palace owner also owns minority shares in sort of a couple of clubs across Europe. And then, of course, there's the other massive conglomerates with 10 or more different football clubs across the different leagues. And it's become a more visible trend with the rise of well-known ownership groups such as the City Football Group, who use their identity and status of their flagship club, Manchester City, and the financial resources of their owners, the Abu Dhabi United Group. They buy up brands like New York City, Melbourne City, Montevideo City Talk. They, high-profile cases like signing Frank Lampard to a contract to play for Man City and then go off to New York and do
to the MLS.
Right? Yeah, it's a thing. That's sort of the one of the big ones, and obviously Red Bull as well, the other sort of well-known one.
Red Bull eats, as we all know.
Yeah, but other than that, it tends to be these sort of smaller conglomerates. But interestingly, this is a stat that shocked me because I didn't know it. I didn't know that many teams were sort of part of it. 50% of teams in the English Premier League are part of some kind of multi-club ownership operation.
That is surprising.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't then dig deeper to find out which teams there were, which in
That's all right.
hindsight would have been a fantastic thing to do.
Just got to let everybody else do a quick Google. That's all. Figure
Or,
out.
well, maybe it's like a little quiz. Maybe we could do it off the top of our head, right? Like definitely Man City.
Man City, Newcastle,
Yeah,
Crystal Palace. Apparently,
yeah,
weren't Everton eventually bought by a larger group most
I believe
recently?
so. Yeah, they're part of some group as well. And then of course there's yeah, I don't know.
You could leave it at that for the time
We'll leave
being.
it at that. But look, it shows that with those sorts of numbers, there's clearly some kind of benefit to it, right? Like it wouldn't be that common if it was a negatively impacting thing, if it wasn't beneficial to clubs to do it. So, what are the benefits? Well, the obvious step is that the funding available for clubs that align themselves with these ownership groups, like the City Football Group, is easier to find, easier to come by. If you're a side who is not a sort of rich cultural club, and then you get bought by them, obviously they have all of the resources to throw at it and go on to be that thing. One example is Palermo, who have been bought by the City Football Group in a league where most clubs don't have other powerful investors, so they're benefiting from that in that league and taking that investment and doing it. Obviously, there are actual like rules and laws and regulations that will prevent clubs actually sharing finances, right? That's not a thing. It's not
Yeah, it's
okay.
Chelsea Strasbourg, right, where they sent out a bunch of
Mm.
players that they've bought on loan immediately to basically, there you go, there's another one, Chelsea, to sort of make the numbers make sense, where they've spent, I don't know, £1 billion, and apparently that's okay.
Yeah. And obviously that's a thing, right? These groups, it's not the finances of the group that are scrutinized by these like financial fair play rules and the profit and sustainability. Each club has to have their own individual sets of finances. However, it has been said that just knowledge of these numbers, like you say, to balance the books here or balance books there, is enough to be of a benefit to the entire group, right? You can shift it about in a slightly more creative manner. Uh, on top of the finances, there's obviously something that'll be very familiar to you and Isaac, the ability to share data. Obviously, data in the modern world is a very powerful thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially in football. Uh, Obviously, in the footballing world, each club has its own allowances and its own setups within the league of what it's allowed for, like scouting and academies and sort of projects. And in a group, all of these data points can be shared and benefited upon from everyone, and not just for like transfer targets, but also things like structuring game plans against an opposition, right? If they've played in the European competition against them and you come up against them domestically, there's potential there. But also through networks and academies that are able to set up, because you could all of a sudden have someone in the not as big and famous Palermo setup who all of a sudden comes up through this academy and is like, wow, there's definitely promise here. Let's ship him off to Man City's academy where he'll get better training, better facilities, because they're able to do that. Whereas as an individual club, Man City wouldn't be able to set up an academy and a training scout network every city as far and wide as the group can set up. And that
Probably helps them get around the weird rules with like youth transfers as well, right? There was a big thing for years where Chelsea were just buying up all of the under 21 players, but just seen another one of those clubs, Greg, because I'm just going to continually add to that list. Manchester United, the Ineos Group, also in Nice, which I was completely unaware of as well.
huh?
So again, you learn something new every day.
Well, there you go.
But like Strasbourg being in the Conference League and Chelsea being the Champions League means that it's not as much of an issue. They can still technically transfer players between each other. But if
Yeah,
you play in the same league, you can't, which I feel surely strangles the other team. I think I've spoken briefly to you about this in the past, right? Where I don't really perceive us being in the Europa League the same time as Gostepi at any point. However,
Yeah.
If we were, that would be a problem.
Well, maybe we'll get onto that and some of those issues. But first, mate, let's take a little breather, sit back for a minute, and have a little word from our partners at Bioniq.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Okay, mate. And we are back. So still focusing on the benefits at the moment. And thinking about that. And the biggest example really that is I guess like the go-to, the big success of this multi-club model, who really seem to have sort of nailed the art, is the Red Bull Group, right? They have had success with many of their teams, and the key to their success is their feeder system. They have a clear hierarchy, which becomes common as you look at these multi-club models and see how they work, is that the hierarchy is what's important, where other clubs just feed into the top club. And, you've seen examples of this with Strasbourg and Salzburg and Leipzig, who have both succeeded domestically and also fed into each other. So there are some like big players who I didn't realise had gone through and had a good season at Salzburg and then immediately been transferred up that ladder to Leipzig. So we're talking Sozoblai, who now plays for Liverpool, right? Benjamin Sesko, Upamecano, they all came through this Red Bull system and they all did well at Salzburg and then immediately fed into this Leipzig team.
I reckon if we hadn't have got Mane as early as we did, that wouldn't really surprise me. And I can remember, I don't know if it was for one of our manager profiles, or potentially actually about a player. But one of the conversations I remember having with you was one of the managers at one point, I think, was managing Salzburg and got really, really frustrated because of the fact that they basically were asset stripping them and sending them all up the chain, obviously to the German Bundesliga, meaning that they were like, well, how are we meant to sustain this position at top of the Austrian league if every single time we'd start to do well and put a team together, you then take that team away and put them elsewhere?
Indeed. And so what that leads and reads to me is obviously the key to success in these systems. Same with the City Football Group, right? Man City is very clearly the top of that hierarchy, and then they have the others underneath. Is where does Saints sit in the hierarchy of Sports Republic group of clubs, right? Because from what has been said and what we would believe, we should be the top, their flagship team.
The flagship, right?
Yeah. But we're yet to really see any benefit from this as the top club, right? Potentially Masuki benefited from a year on loan out at Giuseppe and then came to us.
Not that he's had a chance this season so far.
Have we seen him? No. Other than that, it's not really been a two-way street. We've seen players come into us and go out to them immediately and then stay there forever.
Well, Joachim Kaya-Sander is the other way around, right? He was, doing quite well in the sort of youth setup for France. Played for VAFC. I'm not going to try and pronounce the French name. Then we signed him, had a bit of pre-season. I think he even debuted, it was end last season. I can't remember. He's definitely played a game.
Yeah.
And then was sent out on loan into the same league as that club for another team, bizarrely. That is, other than that, it's Matthias Liss, who came to Saints, immediately went out on loan, and has now been permanently transferred away.
Yeah.
And that Juan guy, the Brazilian that was supposed to come in as a striker for us, alongside, I want to say, Wellington, right?
It
They were
was
both
Wellington, yeah.
pre-contracts. He ended up signing sooner, and then he's now gone to Giuseppe permanently. So
Yeah.
because arguably they're doing better than us. You know, they got promoted and have stayed in the top Turkish league, but it's not really the same level of like revenue, in my opinion, that they would be expecting us to generate, right?
Yeah, and it's an interesting thought, an interesting point. It definitely requires a deeper dive and a better thought process to fully analyse Sports Republic's activities as a whole. And it's something that I don't think either you or I have enough access to any of the parts of the club or the information to know for sure either way. But what is clear is that whether we're at the top or not, we're yet to really reap the benefits of these so-called systems. So that is interesting. I'm going to move on from benefits to shortfalls of the systems, and then a bit later on how we can protect against those shortfalls, and then a bit of a ramble about some other Saint stuff. But first of all, let's have a little break and have a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. Alright, mate, so let's move on to some of the shortfalls of multi-club ownership. So there is, to me at least, as I've been doing this sort of reading and research, a very obvious grey area that comes to mind when you talk about it. For example, in a world where the financial restrictions in leagues and in continents are such a pressing issue, right? We talk about PSR and whether that's made the Premier League less competitive, and it's not exclusive to England. Other leagues have very strict sort of imposing rules. Like Germany has the 50+1 rule, which I'm sure has an impact. Another argument can be made about the fairness of being able to pull resources and data that aren't money outside of that system, right? Because if you're limiting a budget to do certain things, and then another club is spending £43 million on scouts that you're also benefiting from, is that actually, to the spirit of those rules? Is that fair? Is it reasonable? And I'm assuming that's why we see such high number of people doing it, right? It's almost like you can do so much with that would otherwise not be just in the budget.
Same as owning different types of companies, right? And the same thing with, if you're a big corporation and you also own another corporation in another country that harvests sugarcane and you produce rum, they're not going to get the money for that, right? Like, it's just, you are able to strip that for resources much better. Like, it doesn't really work the way it should. And that's kind of how I feel with these multi-club models. Is, as you pointed out, there is a champion as such, right? So there's a big main club, and they're the ones that realistically supposed to get all of the benefit. Whereas a lot of the smaller clubs, like, I don't really, you never really see that. As I pointed out, if Strasbourg made it to the Champions League and they had to pick between where they're sending resources, Strasbourg or Chelsea, you know what the answer is going to be, which means that you're always going to have to live with that over your head, that you are not the parent essentially of your own organization, and ultimately it's such a, it doesn't work with like supporters. Like, I think there's been a bit of camaraderie between us and Giuseppe because, like, it's just so distant. Like, we're never going to really meet them on the field, but like, you don't support a multi-club model. You don't support Red Bull. You support your team, and I think that's where it just feels so alien, and I don't think it'll ever quite click.
No, and we are seeing that, right? Because the Premier League and UEFA actually have certain legislation and rules within their competitions that prevent it. No more visible than, of course, Crystal Palace in the Europa League, right? That was a big news story at the start of the year. And they arguably were not even actually in a situation where it was a proper multi-club ownership, right? It just happened that one of their shareholders also held shares somewhere else. There's also strict rules, right, between the clubs on transfers between associated clubs, and they're treated with a much higher level of scrutiny than transfers to other parties, right? Which could actually lead to some of the benefits. Like if you're trying to sell a player who is worth 20 million to the club for 20 million, they, if that's come under scrutiny and actually like, no, I just don't think they're actually worth that. Like you could hit, like, we know how bumpy of a business transfers are in general already, right? And how much goes into causing those hold-ups. It's just like another potential bump in the road if you're opening yourself up to that higher level of scrutiny because you're deciding to deal with someone in your ownership group, which I can only presume is like the reason that you were pointing to earlier about Kaya Sander going out on loan to someone else, because presumably easier to do, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's not something that I was really aware of until I did the research in this, and it's not something I was really sort of paying attention to. It's not the sort of thing you really think about. But with that, and UEFA being against it, Premier League being against it, and there already being scrutiny and then bringing rules into place, are we potentially heading towards a future where it might not be allowed to exist in a model like that? Well, it seems unlikely because I'm sure some of the key stakeholders would have a thing or two to say about that. But even if it's not completely shut down, right, it could become a lot harder to work within that space because they want to keep the competition integrity and sanctity, right? Like there's examples, like you say, the example I've written down, you used Strasbourg and Chelsea, but I used Salzburg and Leipzig, right? If they were drawn together in a European competition because, they'd managed to get through somehow, this is why these rules exist, right? How can you possibly protect yourself from saying there would be no collusion, even if there is no intent for there to be that collusion anyway? How can you
Yeah. No,
prove that?
exactly that. And this is one of the things that I think is a problem. It's a
Yeah.
huge problem. And it's one of the things that means I don't really necessarily agree with them. And I don't just mean in the sense of Sports Republic, I just mean like as a whole. Because also, again, like I think that some of the, because you also then get the sort of arguments that a lot of Newcastle fans made. It's like, oh, we can't spend all of the money that our owners sort of have. Like, well, actually, I guess that's kind of a good thing. But then that opens up the question to PSR, which is a whole separate issue. And I think it's just, it's so much more complicated than I think anybody wants it to be. But I think it's getting to a level of complexity where it's outstripping the rules and regulation, right? So this is like, it's like with computers and AI and all this kind of stuff, is that like, they're still struggling to like figure out rules for social media. And it's been part of the cultural zeitgeist for like 25 years. They still don't know if it's the responsibility of the company, if it's the responsibility of government. Nobody knows. And it's such a complex issue. And like you can take advantage of that. And I think that this is what is happening a lot of the time with these sort of multi-club models, is that because of all these different rules and stuff, there are going to be ways to get around them.
Yeah. And so, because there's potential here, right, for situations that throw the entire game into disrepute, right? That is not something that any governing body really wants to put themselves in, right? That's just not a position that they can get behind. So my next section is if this is the future we can head towards, where it could be harder or not viable to be a multi-club model. How can you protect against it? And now this was maybe the most interesting part as I sat down and ruminated upon it and thought about sort of what we could do. And to me, the obvious protection is to build the club to be independently successful as well as playing its part within the group. And when I thought about that and what that might look like from a financial standpoint, I couldn't help but think of things like the Dell pub and level one, right? Like, they're controversial, and I get it, because especially these progressions being made whilst the football's not great is a conversation, a thought path. But these are things that are being put in place to make the club more financially successful and more financially secure going forward. And we talked at length in the transfer window about how horrible it is to follow the football club as a business instead of as a football club.
Yeah.
But we also talked about getting to the point where without one, you can't really have the other, right? Now, the example I've pulled out as an aside here is Tottenham, right? Because they built a new stadium, and their new stadium was, multi-purpose, and they now make a shed load of money from doing absolutely nothing apart from having a top-notch stadium that can hold all of the events, right? Like, in the last month, I know they've had American football and different concerts and all sorts of nonsense, because it was built in a way that can handle a turnover fast enough and still be a football pitch. And then, they see huge business success off the back of that. And I know, Tottenham are easily the butt of a lot of jokes, and for the longest time, they were the butt of the joke of the team who would never win a trophy. And I know that their form in the league is not and has not been fantastic, but they did win that trophy last year, that European trophy, and that's, that is a big deal. And that comes from sticking with these financial successes and building up, right? And that's I think the future that Sports Republic see for Southampton. And it's interesting, because I get it, and I'm here to have the conversation about if that investment's right, and if, why'd they spend all that money on level one instead of a striker, right? Sure, I'll have that conversation, but when you're thinking bigger picture and you're thinking long term, it means we're less reliant on, we have to feed a player up through Valenciennes and Gustepe because we don't have enough money to buy a decent player. Right? You following? You with me, Zach? You in agreement at this point?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I think it's the problem is it's like as useful and as wonderful as that will be, it's very future focused, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard after like 4 wins in, I think it's like 47 games, for anybody to be future focused and think this is a good thing, because I think that because the football has been so bad in the last couple of years, it's really hard for anybody to kind of look outside that and see, oh, this could be beneficial long term. Because again, it's like you pointed out, like, okay, level one, you can't have level one instead of a striker. You can't have a striker instead of level one. Let's not be ridiculous here.
It's
However,
not a direct trade-off, right?
no, of course it's not a direct trade-off. But the problem is that it's like, I guess what's even worse is like, well, you're able to build this, you can't even hire a striker, and that's what the business is, right? And that's where, and obviously that is summed up in summed up in a shorter way that I have, maybe more to the point. But I can kind of understand why people are annoyed. But like, yeah, I get what you mean. Like, this isn't how they're thinking. They're not going to think like this. But in regards to like multi-club ownership as a whole, I think that you're right. The biggest issue with us as a club as well is that, like, what real benefits have we seen?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I'll tell you what, mate, it is almost like I know you well enough that I foresaw your responses, because my closing thought and my closing paragraph, I think, sums it up really beautifully. So it is subtitled, "Is it better?" And after all the reading, all the research, and all the bits I've been through, honestly, I don't know.
Perfect.
But it is what we're stuck with, right? And when I sit back and think about it, and sort of take a step back from the current football situation, I'm glad that the approach we're seeing, whilst not necessarily always being right or always being popular, seems sensible enough that not all of their eggs are in this multi-club model basket, right? They're pushing for the club to be a success outside of that, as well as part of that. That said, they definitely need to put a bigger focus back on the football.
Which is funny, Greg, because I'll curveball you that with the reports from the other day coming out, which you might have missed from your research, of them trying to buy a Romanian team and it going absolutely like they didn't manage to do it. I can't remember who it was. There was literally reports of like, as of I want to say, like yesterday, they had put in a bid for this club in Romania and failed to get it.
Yeah.
So it's like clearly they're still thinking about expanding.
Of course they are,
when they should be paying more attention to what's going. Like again,
but look,
5,000 fans not being there isn't going to hurt their pockets too much. But
right, this is the thing, right? Because they're a business and they're trying to build their business, and they want to be a multi-club business, and they are going to continue to try and grow that, and that's fine. And they're also within that ecosystem trying to build the clubs up independently for success. But what I came back to is that the biggest switch I think they need to make from the football perspective is actually to step away from exclusively this multi-club model, right? Because if you look at all of the players we signed this summer, and there's conversations that I'm sure we will have as the season goes on about how good or bad they have been, I think at this point I still am thinking more of our signings were good than bad. But the pattern is that they are all young players with potential, and the potential is that we could sell them for a higher price later on. And that is all from the same viewpoint of this multi-club model, and that is not the answer. We need to actually sign players who can play the football we want to play and not be signing assets to be sold at a later date, right? And
there it is. That's the key part of it, right? Is that we've currently got a bunch of players that are either too inexperienced to know what's going on, are investments that we can probably sell on for more, or alternatively players we've not managed to ship yet.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that realistically what we want are players that are able to help progress the football team, which will ultimately get them more profit longer term. That isn't how they're going to see that, because that isn't how business people think.
And do I have the answers as to what we can do to fix the football on the pitch at the moment? No. At the moment, probably nothing. I think, in my opinion, exclusively my opinion perhaps, at the moment we just need to stick with it. Hope the process comes out without sounding too much like Russell Martin. Trust the process, stick with it. I think that it will come good, and I hope that it does. But even if the patience with Sports Republic is running out, and it very visibly is, we have seen it, the fact of the matter is that trying to grow into other teams only shows that they are not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So, I mean, moaning about it really isn't going to do a lot, is where I'm at.
Yeah. Alternatively, they build up a big enough portfolio to then get rid of us because they see us as a problem, and then we get left with whoever wants to pick up those pieces.
Exactly.
And it's not always better. That's the problem, right? I know that anyone seems to think that anything is better right now. And I've even seen some wild recent defenses of Gao as somebody that's like, well, at least we were self-sustaining. And I was like, we were not self-sustaining. There's a reason.
Shocking.
We were self-sustaining in the sense of we weren't able to replace any of the players that left and then eventually fell out. It was Hudson whose miracles that eventually ran out, right? That's where. And also, to be clear, when people are talking about that era, we lost 9-0 twice.
Yeah, I would love to do a proper deep dive into the financial happenings of the club under Gao and why those problems are only surfacing now, but I am not switched on enough to finances to do that. But
I would also point out that a lot of it is because nobody can access that information, because again, he was a businessman from China who I would like to point out have failed the ownership test the first time around, by the sounds of it, made some stuff up for the second time, and during that time had an entire company that wasn't real that was liquidated. That disappeared. It wasn't a real, and also he was also a multi-club guy, right? Because I'm pretty sure I want to say it was like Valencia or somebody. We had that on LD, also sponsored by LD Sports because they were also owned by him.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's not pretend that the grass was greener
No,
the
look, that's
ownership
it.
before.
Look, that's it. And look, nobody on this podcast is saying that Sports Republic are perfect, right?
No.
And nobody's saying they've not made mistakes. And nobody's really saying that
Constantly.
they have any confidence that they will get it right at any point. There is hope that they will. But at the end of the day, we don't get a choice in it. They're here to stay. They're going to be here to stay for a while. And at least they, in the business side of things, are doing good stuff. And that only goes to upset people more because the football side isn't. But actually, if the football side comes good, happy days, right?
I think that's the big difference, right? Is if the football side becomes good, like there wasn't half as much of these grumbles during our good championship season.
Yeah.
There were still questions, don't get me wrong. There were still lots of questions around Russell Martin and the type of football and the goals we're letting in and this, that, and the other. But it wasn't as much of a problem until they allowed it to completely fall apart without really any oversight whatsoever. Decided to tune in after they fired him because they were like, well, we can't ignore 5-0 losses, like 3 in a row. Really sorry, my guy. And then proceeded to hire their mate who will happen to just be unemployed at the time in Ivan Juric, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions they have made that are absolutely insane. I don't see them not like, I don't know what the rot is. I think it started before them. I think that they haven't found the right answer so far to figure out what it is. But the problem is that because we still support the club, we've always seen it as one entity, but it's not. It's been different entities, multiple different entities over multiple different times, right?
Look, the answer at the end of the day is simple, isn't it? Win 4 games.
Win football games.
Yeah, win 4 games. Sign a striker. Everyone's happy again. Chuck a free beer in the mix, maybe, or whatever. No one's fussed. Win some games. Sign a striker. Bish bash bosh. It's it, innit? Easy as that.
Told you. Free beer.
Yeah.
It's a free beer.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Free beer on match day.
Yeah.
Everyone would be so much happier.
And maybe just like stop trying to force cringe engagements like shouting surnames. That's not going to happen. And if you are going to do that, prepare for what you're going to do for when the name Wellington comes out, because come on.
Or if you want the engagement, again, score some goals.
Score some goals, win some games. Easy as
goals.
That. We've solved it.
Gabbiadini pizza that's more than like a slither of a slice. They paid £9 for what is essentially a child's portion.
We solved all the problems, mate. We fixed it. Who knew it was as easy as that? Right. Look, that's it. That is all we've got time for today. I've rambled on and on and on. I hope you've enjoyed my little deep dive into multi-club models. I didn't really come up with an answer as to whether it's better or not, and that's because, who knows, it's grey area. That will come down to your personal preference. I'd like to think that you will all form your own opinions based off of, mine and your research. Thank you, Zach, for listening to me ramble on today.
No, thank you so much, mate. It was a really good episode.
You, everyone, for joining us. We're going to be back tomorrow to talk more about football. We've got a game of the weekend coming up against Blackburn, and we've got to try and get optimistic for it, mate. We've got big things happening. They come thick and fast. Let us know. What do you think about multi-club models? Are they the future or are they the evil? Let us know. We're on all the socials. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky. All of them. Did I say TikTok? I don't know. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, everyone, have a great day and we'll see you then.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.